I was called once, and Chucky was still a very small baby. I was called once to see if I would like to go on what was like an educational, it's called a Blue Book seminar, of the various agencies in our community. And I told them that I would be happy to do it, but that I couldn't, put it to any use because I had a very small child at home. And I couldn't commit myself to anything. But they said, come anyway. So I went, and it was about a 4 or 5 week session where once a week we got into a very small bus and had a whole morning where we visited a local agency. And it was an eye-opener to me. I didn't know anything about the Jewish community. I had no background coming into it. I had no religious training whatsoever. And the result of that was that they asked me to do some card calling. And they gave me 10 cards to call people on the phone. But I said I went to see a couple of them. And I was so good at it, getting the money, that's how they asked me to be on the Speakers Bureau. And somehow or other I felt I could manage to do it even with a small child. And that's how I got started.
Did Dad put pressure on you in any way about
Never.
Fundraising?
Never.
Do you think he felt at all competitive with you when you were on the same boards?
No, except I made it my business when we were on the same board. We never sat together. I wouldn't sit with him because we didn't always agree on an issue. And we'd cancel each other's votes out. But I was thoroughly supportive of his, of his being president of the Y camps, and that he really was interested in it.
No resentment about the amount of time you had to be away with night and weekend meetings?
No. And I didn't do it when the children were younger, if you remember. I didn't get to that height that they sent me away overnight, when I was a national member. It was just local. I'd go out after dinner or go out in the afternoon. I always used to think that I would like to be a nurse, but when Daddy got sick, I realized I was not cut out to be a nurse. I'd never had the patience for it. But I wish I had been trained to do in some kind of useful profession and had been able to do it. I think I would have made a very good teacher because I've loved teaching whatever I know. I can remember teaching a dance step up at the Y camp when the parents were all up there once to somebody who had 2 left feet. And I just enjoyed, teaching people whatever I could to make things easier for them. And I somehow had an understanding of lots of times of the problems that they were encountering because I had encountered them myself. But my mother was a school teacher and hated it, and she really told me I never wanted to be a school teacher, so I never did. A written speech is no good spoken. It isn't the same flow of language, and anyway, I felt that every time I heard a speaker who read, he lost from me. And I once read that Theodore Roosevelt said the same thing. If you don't maintain eye contact with your audience, they'll start thinking about what are they going to have for dinner that night. A man will start thinking about what's the next business problem that he's got to tackle. And so I never read a speech. I just had a little card, about 3x5 card, with whatever figures I needed, because I'm no good on figures, I forget them. And so I would just refer to the figures. But otherwise, I always spoke. But I would rehearse it till I got it down to within a minute of the time that I was allotted. And I also made it a point, if they told me to speak 15 minutes, I'd speak 12. I was in Augusta, Georgia, and it was an afternoon meeting, and it was the time of the Polish uprising and eventual killing of what was the name of the liberty movement in in Poland.
Solidarity.
Solidarity. And they had really almost wiped out Solidarity, when the communists got stronger. And somebody in the middle of the speech said to me, "What do you think, Mrs. Risen, about what is happening in Poland today?" And I said, as a representative, which was my answer always, as a representative of the National UJA, I really can't give you any kind of an answer. But if you'll wait till the end of the regular program, I'll be glad to talk about it. And usually that stopped all the questions. But at the end of the program, they were ready for coffee and cake and schmoozing, and they forgot their questions. But this woman didn't. And when it was over, she came up to me and she said, "Well," she said, and there were a whole group of them, "What do you think, about it?" And I said to them, "Well," I said, "I hate to see any kind of movement for democracy and liberty destroyed. I hate to see it destroyed anywhere in the world. But if it had to happen somewhere, better Poland than any other place." Because, well, they were such anti-Semites and remain so. We had one particular head of the Federation who used to give us a day-long indoctrination, and I could pull stories from there. But I could also pull stories just by reading about immigrants, for example, from Russia or from the concentration camps, who went to Israel and all they could take was one suitcase. And instead of just saying, "Take one suitcase," I would say to a group of women, because I mostly spoke to women, I would say to a group of women, "How do you decide what to put in that suitcase?" I said, "You're taking small children. You don't know whether you're going to the north of Israel or the south of Israel. If you're going north, you need winter coats for those children. It's cold." And I said, "At the same time, you have family pictures that will be your only heritage for the children. Do you take the pictures and leave the coats?" I said, "How do you decide what to take for a whole lifetime to put into one suitcase?" And they would all think, what would I do with Grandma's picture? So I could see them thinking. And then I would say, I remember particularly one of the first speeches I made was a day just like today. And I'd say, you and I are going home and we're going to have a nice warm lunch or whatever we like for lunch, and we're perfectly free to go home through the sunlight and the bright winter weather. I said, but in Israel, a woman is going to walk down the street, down the steps, and she has to go marketing just as you and I do for her family. And she doesn't know whether the market is to the left or to the right. And she doesn't know how to handle the money that she's got in her hands. And she can't even ask anybody because she doesn't have the language. She has no tongue. And I said, what you give today will give her the freedom to make those choices. Well, they gave.
Where's my checkbook?
Yeah. No, and I was that kind of speaker. And I could always do it. So, almost always do it. I couldn't do it in Buffalo.